All right, here we go again. It is season 11. As we get underway, the golf season here in southern Ontario, as I call spring, the season of the big lie. Because, you know, one day, a couple days ago, I was playing with our buddy Kent, and it's like 20 degrees. And then today, it's just going to rain. Like a little bit of overcast, and then, Timmy, like 10 degrees for the next 2 weeks.
10 degrees, that's almost balmy.
Sorry, go ahead there, Timmy.
It's almost balmy compared to what it should be.
Well, you know, that's the thing, is it goes up and down, and like a lot of things in life, like golf, like the world. Welcome to episode 315 of Swing Thoughts. Tim O'Connor, of course, Coach Tim, me, golf spiritual leader. I don't think Fred knows that. I've decided to. It's almost embarrassing because today we actually have golf spiritual leader with us, but it's a long story. Some other time, Fred will tell you how I decided I would be golf spiritual leader, you know, in your absence. This program is brought to you by TaylorMade QI 4D drivers. They are their fastest, most fittable drivers. Is it time to find your new fast? We say, yes, it is. For a long time, Tim and I have joked that if you were somebody that drank, that listening to our podcast, every time we mention Fred Shoemaker, that if you took a drink, at the end of almost every episode, you would be hammered. But finally, after a lot of time that has passed, it is great to welcome back to our program, I would say a true pioneer in mindful performance. He has spent decades helping golfers get out of their own way and into a more natural, instinctive way of looking at the game. He's an author, he's a coach, and one of this game's most original thinkers, and one of this game's absolute nicest people, Fred Shoemaker.
Guys, good morning.
Hey, pal.
Good to see you, Fred.
Hey, Tim.
So I like the fact that you're on our show in 2015, and then you waited for your return engagement until you knew that we were an established show. So
That's right.
that we actually could make it, past 5 or 6, because most podcasts don't. But anyways, welcome back to the show. Good to see you. I was thinking that a nice place to start, Fred, would be kind of the look. I mean, we don't need to look at your entire life, but just maybe a brief look on how you went from being a very avid, very good junior golfer to a tournament player who did a lot of the things that a lot of our listeners do. Fixate on mechanics, self-image wrapped up in your score. And then how did you what was your path to taking a different way of looking at the game that you embody now?
Well, mostly pure luck. Running into people who, we all resist change, but sometimes things get past our guard and we actually develop, transform, shift. It's a rare thing. And I have the same, resistance to change as anybody else. But as a summary, I've been coaching golf now. It's my 50th year. And I haven't got a lot of conclusions, but I will share whatever I've got. But I was a golf coach at University of California at Santa Barbara a lifetime ago. And I saw something on TV called The Inner Game of Tennis, a guy named Tim Galway. So I said, this is different. I got to get a lesson from this guy. So I go down to Los Angeles, get a lesson from him. He's a tennis guy. And I went into the lesson with being a golf instructor with a model, ideas, and how students should be. And I left the lesson as the beginnings of a coach, realizing that the genius, in a way, exists in the other person. And my job is to bring it out rather than put it in. And that was a moment that was just by, I think, just pure accident that Tim was there. And the second time, things really made a difference for me. I was asked to go to the Cayman Islands to work with a workshop with people who are in the leadership position of both in terms of both transformational work and leadership. And I should have paid to give this workshop to them. So at the end of this, one of the guys was responsible for putting personal computers on desks at an affordable price. And so I'm walking on the beach with him the second day of the workshop. And I got up enough courage to ask him, is there anything I should be doing that would make it make me better at what I'm doing? And he said 5 words. And that shifted my life the same way that Tim Galway did. And he said, context, not content, is decisive. And he said, if you think that people are going to be able to see their own conditioning of how they've become who they are, rather than say, they will say, this is the world, the way the world is, not the way I've been conditioned. He said, you could hold up a mirror to have people see how their assumptions and beliefs and point of views and worldview is. And from that, you might offer different possibilities. Because from that, I realized changing the content of people's golf swings or people's attitudes doesn't really matter. It's the context in which they see things that makes all the difference. So I've pretty much focused the rest of my coaching life on taking a look at how do people transform without the transformational moment. They come to see the world stays the same, but they live in a different world. Mm-hmm. And that's what's interesting to me at this point.
There's so much there, and in preparation for you coming back, I talked to a very good friend of mine who's gone all Fred all the time. Like, he's quoting you back to me, and he's done a deep Shoemaker dive. So you've been in a lot of conversations that I've had.
I'm sorry for that.
No, it's been great. He went back and listened to the interview that we did in 2015, and he had a bunch of comments, including, he said, Howard, you're different than you were 10 years ago. And I thought about it. I said, well, I hope I've learned to conduct this program and myself differently, because I'd hate to be the same. But I want to get back to when you began all of this in California at the time. Was it around the time of, I want to say, like the Esalen Institute, and there was a lot of things going on, a lot of transformation in the air of pop psychology and things. Did that influence you at all?
Of course it did. I mean, by the way, I did work at Esalen for 9 years doing a workshop called Golf in the Kingdom.
Right.
How could it not? You see, everything modifies us. We are in constant behavior modification, where let's say the books do and TV does and radio did. See, the interesting thing about these types of modification, they were all partial. In my experience, see, I'm interested in not having ideas be calcified, but to have them being able to move to new and develop. But the interesting thing about today's world, the iPhone or the smartphone, is almost a total behavior modification. And I'm very interested in how do you counteract that in life? See, it tells you what to think, how to think, where to think. And I've just noticed that that you talked about in California, it was a lot about how do you create resourceful, independent people who trust themselves, people who have their own capacity to think for themselves. And I find that rare and rare. I just see that most people are, I think they call it doom scrolling now to the next tweet in the next video.
You mentioned the word context when you're talking about the experiences that you came away from those 2 examples you began with. Let's get right into golf a little bit, because we're a golf podcast, but we spend a lot of time talking about, as Tim would say, a lot of woo-woo stuff on the show. How do you think your idea of the context of golf instruction has changed? And what do you think about the way that golf has been disseminated for all these years?
Well, I think my business is called change. And the thing you can look at is, how do people actually change? And I think that basically there's only 3 ways I've ever seen. One is by accidents. You can figure out what that one is. You can also, or you could even call it births, deaths, accidents. Another is by nature. I mean, look what happened to Puerto Rico after the hurricane. And the third one is a new perspective and a new worldview. And so that is what the intention to provide that. I mean, contextual questions like if you ask a person, is golf a test or a gift? Their answer to that will show you how they play and the amount of tension in their body, what they think about. And the next, other question is, what do you really, really want? Why do you do this? See, this is kind of a long answer. I don't mean to stay long with it.
Don't take your time. You're the reason we're doing this.
Yes.
See, you know who Charlie Munger is, right? He's Warren Buffett's business partner. And he said something that I was very interested in. He said, if you show me the incentives, I will show you the outcome. So the iPhone the promise was to give everyone instant access to information and to connect them with all of their friends. And we will have the least lonely generation we've ever had and the most enlightened and informed generation we've ever had. And as you know, it's exactly the opposite. I mean, I won't read you all the statistics about loneliness and depression and hopelessness in youth and in older age. So, the system has been optimized for the next perfect video, as I just talked about. It's called the bait and switch. So, interesting enough, there's also a bait and switch in golf. And the golf culture has a revolving theme that if you get better, you'll be happier. And so every commercial you see, everything that you see in these things is about getting people better. But I've noticed, unless something changes in the person themselves, getting better doesn't matter. It's kind of like, getting a new shirt or eating a piece of chocolate. You feel good for a while, and then it's still you. The same relationship to failure and to self-trust and how you try to get approval from other people is still all there. See, I don't really like to make definitive statements, but this whole notion of getting better equals happiness is a lie. Well, and if it were, go ahead, Howard.
I was going to, sorry, Tim and Fred, I just want to interject because in your book you actually say something, and I love this sentence. You say, the problem with the game is we confuse the goal of the game, which is scoring, with the purpose of the game.
Yes. See, there is a fundamental, and that is, why do you do this? You guys, why do we whack a piece of rubber in a park, chase it for 4 or 5 hours, talk about it, and when you realize that, to be blunt, the purpose of golf is not to be good at it. Because being good at golf is not going to do you any good. It's not going to help your relationships. It won't help your bank account. It won't make you a better citizen. So why are you doing it? And we don't actually confront that question very often. What's the purpose of it is for you to decide for yourself. And not many people say, listen, this is inherently has no meaning, hitting rubber in a park like that. And if someone came from another planet and looked down and said, what are they doing? They're trying to get it in the hole in 4 versus 5. And I said, he would say, well, does this anything for the city? Does it anything for their family? No. Well, what's the value of it then? See, you can hitting a 9-iron hit too close to the hole may have some value on the golf course. You get a stroke less. But until you actually say, what could be the value? What can you learn while you're learning to play golf? Is a better question, I think.
So Howard, Fred, you people resist change though, right?
We all do.
You mentioned earlier you resist. As a society, we seem to be more and more conditioned that if we take in more information, we will get better and thus we will achieve nirvana and be happy. But obviously it's not happening. So I actually think it's getting, frankly, worse. I agree with you due to phones. So I don't know. Howard and I have been doing this podcast 11 years now. You've been talking about this stuff for 30 years. Friends like Carl Morris. what do you think is going to make the change? Is that people are just going to finally get tired of hitting their head against the wall and finally wake up, or like how do you think you can disseminate this message so people actually get it?
Well, I'll give you I won't bury the lead here. I'll give you a conclusion of 50 years of doing this. Okay. Having a golf life that works is very, very simple. First, honor your commitment to yourself. I mean, do you even have one? I mean, most people's commitment is trying to get other people's approval. You know how exhausting that is. And the second thing is keep possibility alive for yourself and others. See, I mean, I've asked this question to a group I was talking to last week. If you hit a ball in the heel and it went into the woods in the first hole, would you be upset? And everybody says yes. Why would you be upset? They say, because it didn't meet my expectations. Okay. So I said, you hit a ball in the heel, it goes in the woods, but you know thereafter you're going to play the most extraordinary golf of your life. Would you be upset? No one is upset. So the future is the context for the present. How you see the future gives you how you are now. Tim, if you know this is going to be the best evening of your life, you'd be really happy right now. I mean, I worked at a place called the Santa Barbara Free Counseling Center. I sat in on it. When I was in college, and a woman who had a terrible marriage, she got battered quite often. We had 2 months of not being hit by her husband. She felt great. She felt the world was wonderful. And a woman came in who had a great relationship, but they weren't really talking well the last month. She felt terrible. And to me, I'm like, are you kidding? These two, one relationship, great, one's terrible. But it's how we view the future.
Well, I want to pick up on that and then just sort of circle back to something you said about purpose, because, you know, again, having reread the book that brought Tim and I together, this is true. Like, we started talking years ago about things in the world of this type of golf, and your book came up, Extraordinary Golf, and it's called The Art of the Possible. And you talk a lot about playing without fear and purpose in the book. And I think they're interconnected because of what you just said. We're fearful that if we hit a bad shot, that we're going to continue to hit nothing but bad shots.
Yes, yes.
That's the nature of that fear as you define it in the book. But as picking up on what you said a moment ago about the idea of purpose, maybe you could answer this question. Would you say the happiest golfers, people, are the ones who have the least, this is not a technical term, the least murkiness of purpose?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, to know why you play. I had a buddy once, and I said to him, do you ever really go sense shot from beginning to end, see how it's going to go, how it's going to land, where it's going to roll? He goes, no. I said, well, why not, Steve? He goes, because it probably wouldn't happen, and I'd be upset. You see, you realize what it takes to keep possibility alive. It is possible. See, to be a possibilian, so to speak, that it is possible. Just so all possibilities, I could play shitty, I could play okay, this could consider here. You realize it doesn't take brains, it takes courage. But mostly we are chicken-hearted. We don't, I'm sorry to diminish chickens, but to say, you know, it is possible here to keep possibility alive for yourself and others. It's almost overwhelming to ask of what you have to have in your life.
Does keeping possibility alive diminish some of the fear, or it takes the fear out of it?
Well, let's put it this way. Okay, you step to the first tee and you say, I'm committed to swinging freely to that target. Okay? And I said to you, Howard, I have a small caliber gun and I'm going to shoot you in the foot unless you stay with that commitment. Can you see it's no longer diversified interest? Usually it's, I'm committed to that, but I want to look good and also, no, this shall be. And when you get that kind of commitment, the fear isn't there or not there. It's something else is greater than or bigger. See, we are all addicted to looking good, mostly try to be right, get other people's approval. It's like within a normal life, we are like puppets on strings. But there comes a time when something is larger than that, bigger than that, committed to something bigger than your mind's talk. And people who have that kind of know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's possible that we're trying to find our identity through golf. Who I am as a good player, who I am as a good putter, or who I am, I can't play in tournaments, or the whole identity thing. But there's some people who have a sense they are not their mind and have a sense of who they are. I mean, it's almost sounds Californian at this point. It's something doesn't change when you miss hit a golf ball. And whatever that essence is or that part is, tapping into that while you're playing, I don't know. I just love being out there. I love the breeze on the side of my face. I love hanging out with people. So, it's possible that you can find continual happiness from one thing, realizing I am not my mind. I have one. It's useful sometimes, but it says the same crap it says to me since I'm 7 years old. And at some point you have to realize I have one and I can choose other than what my mind says.
But back to the connecting thought about why people don't change, and a lot of it, I think, is the resistance to look in the awkward, uncomfortable places.
Yeah.
Now, we had Carl Morris, who's a friend of yours, a good friend of ours, on a couple shows ago. He says everyone seems to be looking outside, external validation, get as much information as they can. And he said, what golf really does is allows us, the invitation is to do research on ourselves. I think he called it research of one.
Yeah,
but in our
great.
culture, that's not looked upon, because what we're conditioned to see is, do we meet the standard? Do we, whatever's put on Instagram or whatever, are we having the amazing time and having the destination wedding, all this happiness? But to me, that is the invitation of golf, is to take a look at what is my experience. And often that's looking in the uncomfortable places.
Sure. When's the last time you ask anybody, Tim or Howard, what do you see in me that I might not see in myself? And I'll take whatever answer you get as a gift. Or when people say, I like you, bud. You did a good job, bud. We're afraid of this. So when you see a picture book of a family, most of the pictures you see are of the young kids when they're young. And when they're young, amazing changes take place, often effortlessly. We're on a walk and talk and all these things, probably more valuable than anything we'll learn the rest of our lives. So we learn it from our own experience, mostly our awareness and so forth. Then we go to school. And in school, we begin to learn things that are outside of our experience. Where's Mexico? Who's the first president? And we begin to think that other people have answers for us. And we go to play sports. And somebody says, I have an answer for you. Now, it happened for me when I was 14. I took my first golf lesson. That was a hot shot in my little area. So I take this golf lesson from the guy who says, I have a remedy for you. And I wanted to improve. And when he started to work with me, it didn't feel really good. But if he said good, I thought I was on the right track. And if he said not so good. So it's the first times I really began to distrust my experience and have another person who wasn't having the experience validate or not invalidate. And it starts from that, Tim. Having think, I realized, I think I've mentioned this in other places, my teachers in school were really great people, but they weren't people who were scientists. They weren't people who were poets. They had people who read about scientists and read about poetry and were giving pre-thought thoughts back to me. They didn't have the experience. So I'm saying, can we learn from our experience and begin to trust that? And that's what coaching is. To examine one's experience in light of one's intent. You intended to swing freely, and what did you experience? So I think it's early that we give up what we call our greatest gift, and that's the trust of our own experience.
Well, actually, what Carl said to us, and I thought it was brilliant, and Tim paraphrased it, was, and this is in terms of trying to find some kind of swing, which is research your own experience.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And it reminded me of something you said to me once about, we were talking, this was away from the show, And I never forgot this. I was telling you about how much I like to practice, and you said to me, sometimes I just like to go out and hit balls. And I said to you, is that okay? And you went, yeah. And I know what you mean now, because sometimes I'm not out doing anything except experiencing the joy I get from that feeling. Not working on, not doing, not practicing, not sharpening my short game, just experiencing it. And that was a great gift you gave me. And tying into what Carl said, I've done this enough. If I really research my own experience, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe the one way to practice is there's nothing to gain and there's nothing to lose. You simply are present to what's going on. See, if you have something to gain, that thought is in your mind and will take you away from what's actually happening. See, it takes 100% of your attention to fill in a blind spot. And mostly our blind spots run us and own us because the changes that take place in a golf swing happen in blind spots. That's why shots don't do the same. And we're resistant to go there. I mean, I know if I go on the range today, nobody's going to have a camera or look at their shadow or have a mirror. They'll be recanting phrases that they've heard from someone else. And these magical phrases are supposed to change them. Turn your hips, stay down, follow through. So you remember when get the club in front of you was the mantra of everyone, and now it's, shallow the club. So this changes all the time. So how do you learn how to learn?
Well, if so much is, Fred, you and I have talked, I've been fortunate enough to have some private coaching with you. And I remember a couple of times, one of the core themes that we talked about, well, you talking about it, was the role of perception. And if we perceive ourselves as golfers as broken and needed fixing, well, that's a pretty tough place to come from. And it's the same. So if we perceive ourselves that way and we perceive the world as, say, a hostile place, well, that's a pretty tough place to operate from. But yes. You also said something to me, is like, I said, okay, how do we break out of that? And you said, well, rather than being chained to the past, which our perceptions are based on, it'd be more about creating a future that we could now live into.
Wow, it's really good, Tim. Yeah.
So if you could just elaborate what you mean there, because I think that is such a cool thing.
Yeah, I said earlier, the future is the context for the present. Okay. But if you look at most lives, it's really the past over again, the past over again. Just keeps repeating itself day by day. And so, see, creating a future that honors the past, gets everything out of the past, but is not bound by the past. See, coaching could be something like you create a future and then the coaches create it because they watch your actions according to that future. And to bring into existence a future that was never going to happen on its own. That's why coaching is valuable. Okay. But first, it requires the student to look, what is it, a future that I intend and committed to? How many people do that? So, I mean, I've been taken in the last decade to asking people, what's the happy ending? Where are we going with this? And they start out, well, I'm hitting the ball well, solid, got good distance. I say, just stop a second. The happy ending for you, how do you want to end up as a human being? Not at the end, but we're in Act 2 of 3-act play. Let's see if we can get Act 2 right. That leads into Act 3. They say, well, maybe I just want to be able to be more of a listener than a speaker. I want to find contentment out there. I want to be a great playing partner. I want to learn to trust myself and stop listening to everybody else's ideas as if they're the new enlightened ones. And I said, okay, is it okay, given that future you just spoke out, that everything we do together is related to that? And that is where, the lessons are. I mean, I'm interested, see, golf culture is not designed to develop people. And what I've seen is the only thing that makes a difference is developing people.
Can you?
So we're at an impasse.
We've sort of had a little bit of a mini theme this last couple of months when I've asked one of our guest questions generally is the idea around goal setting, and you kind of touched on it there. So when somebody comes to you and says, how do I, or what is the nature of goal setting? You've sort of answered that. Is it to have an experience outside of the game itself, or to have the game itself enhance the experience?
Well, I think you said it earlier. It's purpose setting first.
Right.
Goals untethered by a purpose are kind of a waste of time.
Got it.
So, goals are milestones along the way to the purpose intent. Those are all terrific. But a goal setting is that a person says, I want to be the best. I want to be the best teaching professional player in Northern California. I said, great. For what purpose? And he says, well, I just want, and I said, you're going to spend probably 600 hours this year in that way. Why would you want to do it? Suppose you got it. And it's next year this time. And people say, there's old, what's his name, the best player in Northern California. Is that all? Is that it? Do you ever remember a movie called The Natural?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Love that movie.
Well, it was a short story, first and foremost, a movie. And in the short story, he strikes out in the end because he didn't get it. Get it like his girlfriend asked him, what is all this for? He says, I want to walk down the street and have people say he's the best who's ever been.
Yeah.
And the writer of the short story, I think it was Somerset Maugham, said, this is not a life. This is a way that all you're doing is trying to get some compliment from other people. You're living for other people. So he had him strike out. And I think it would have been a much more powerful movie if he had.
Not in Hollywood, friend.
Not in Hollywood.
Not in Hollywood.
But that's the script that we all live by. You get the big car, you get the corner office, you get your index, you win the tournament, you'll be happy. But the odd thing is that that's the narrative, that's the carrot, if you will. But we see example after example that people don't find nirvana. I watched an interesting movie the other night about how the band, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, formed.
Yeah, I saw that. The documentary. Fantastic.
Yeah. 3 guys in high school just loved hanging out, playing music. So they form a band and they start to get this idea that, whoa, we could really do something and we could have fun. And so as the band progresses, they tick all the boxes. They start, chart topping hits, huge concerts, lots of money, fame. What happens? 2 of them get addicted to heroin. What happened? The narrative didn't work out. They got everything apparently that they wanted, but it still didn't deliver.
Well, and if I may jump in to Fred's point, if they had, I guarantee you when they started, they did not define their purpose as to sell records, get addicted to heroin.
Well, if you say that happiness, most people think happiness is getting what you want, and unhappiness is not getting what you want. But you ever notice you almost never get what you want? I mean, there's never green lights or plenty of parking spaces. Your clothes get dirty and leaf blowers are out. So maybe happiness could be wanting what you get. You see, we're in a sport that no one I have ever known mishits less than 50% of their shots. Everybody mishits more than 50% according to their own expectations. Guys come off the tour and say, I only hit 2 or 3 good shots all day. So are we destined to be mostly upset in our golf games? It's a high, I miss about 80% of my shots. So I've looked into this whole thing about happiness for quite a while, and some small things I've come up with. And see, I've never gotten over the upset, what we call the mental pain of hitting a ball out of bounds. So you hit a ball out of bounds, and my mind goes, these have been playing 69 years, how blah, 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 how can you do this?
Yeah.
But it isn't, see, that's only a short thing. Then it follows with the long story. That's the suffering. See, if you could differentiate the pain from the suffering is, I did this, I'm in front of people, I'm supposed to be a golf pro, blah, blah, blah. And so I have known people and people have gotten past the story. It's the same old story every time. Good, I've got it, I've lost it, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm embarrassed, I'm not embarrassed. It's the same thing. It's like a comedian with a bad joke every time. I mean, Howard, suppose that you found out that your aunt died of tuberculosis when she was young. Your mother tells you. And you would say, that's really sad. I'm really sad for you. But suppose your mother tells you 50 times every day for a year the same story. At some point, you would say, I've got it already. I'm through that. Okay. But in golf, we're so surprised when our mind comes up with the same story every time.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, oh my God, wouldn't it be nice? I watched Nicklaus hit a ball off the tee into the woods. And I ran up there to see what would happen on the next shot. And he said, I sliced it to get it here. I can probably slice it to get it out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the story that's the suffering, not the shot.
In your book, my buddy, my friend who's become another acolyte like the rest of us is my buddy named Grant McDougall, and he said, I said to him, if you could ask Fred Shoemaker any question, what would it be? And he got very excited, Fred. So here's his question. Do you mind?
Sure, let her go.
He says, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'll summarize. He talks about in the book, you talk about playing in the California State Amateur and challenging yourself to play without fear. And I recommend everybody, just if you haven't read Extraordinary Golf after today, you should go out and get it. And so Grant asks, I wonder what Fred's learned in the time since he wrote the book about dealing with fear and how to overcome it while you're playing, and then goes on to say, how do we change the stories we tell ourselves, especially after 60 years of telling the same stories and having them reinforced by experience?
Yes, yes. If I tell a story about a student, I'll do the fellow named Sunil, let's say, and I say, he has really learned how to learn. Anybody I tell it to, in cartoons, they have what a person says, they have a bubble over their head, what they're thinking. They'll say, well, what does he shoot? And I'll say, he's made a huge difference with his force. Some people love to play with him. They say, well, what does he shoot?
Mm-hmm.
No matter what I say, they'll always think that. Then if I say, Sunil, when we met, was 55, and now his handicap was 19, and now he's 61, and his handicap's 3. And they'll say, okay, I'll do that nice guy stuff, and I'll do that. But if it gets me to what do I shoot? And it happens every time. Now, it's the same thing in that thing in the state amateur. I went out with a clear intention of, let's just, for once in my life, I get tired of playing in fear. Mm-hmm. Just play, whatever I get. And I played well. And of course, my mind says, let's do that fear thingy in order to play well. So it wasn't really a commitment. It was a FACO commitment after that. And I've learned from that my mind can make anything into the same thing that it always wants. See, this notion of surviving by looking good and being right and dominating and all those things is so powerful that all you can really do is keep catching it and coming back to your commitment. And whatever your friend, I would say to him, I'm a little less hooked when the ball hooks into the wood.
Nice.
And and that's about it. I mean, and I remember I talked about transformation. The world doesn't change, but you live in a different world. You see things differently. In just to complete this, my experience of anyone transforming has always been linguistic. They start talking differently to themselves, internal and external, and body language. They have a different interpretation no matter what happens. And that is an art to be practiced.
Yes.
And I have a fellow I've been coaching for 20 some years. His name's Scotty. And Scotty, when we met, for some reason from his family, learned how to have an empowering interpretation no matter what happened. He didn't play golf until he was 16 and never played high school or college. He wanted to become a nice player. And he would come back from his first tournaments and say, I hit 3 out of bounds. I have no idea how I did it, but I'd love to find out. No upset, none. And I wonder, how did he get like that? Scotty's now, 36 years old. And he's played in 2 out of the last 3 U.S. amateurs and and also the mid-amateur. So how does a person see? It doesn't matter what happens. It only matters what you say about what happens. Because we all have the same stuff going on with us, But some people learn how to have an empowering interpretation naturally, authentically. Every time you give a golf school and somebody goes out and And we say, okay, we're going to practice solid hit. And he goes out and he comes back in after 15 shots and say, I sucked. I didn't hit any of them any good. And I said, is that true for you? And he goes, yeah, that's my experience. And I said, okay, I'll play act being you. Hi, my name is Jim. I mishit 15 balls. I went into resignation and lost energy. And I said, is that true? He goes, yes. I said, is there any other way to interpret that? And he would say, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, hi, my name is Jim. I had 15 balls. I'm after solid contact was the very most important thing I came for. I'm at the beginning of it. At the beginning, there's mishits, and this is where I am. I gave him 3 other interpretations that were more empowering. Each one he said that could be possible. See, the guy who cut you off in traffic could be going to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So learning how to interpret in different ways that empower you are important. Probably the most important thing.
Fred, love that. As you say, changing, you said the linguistics, like how we're talking to ourselves. So we're at the start in the art part of the world where the golf season is just starting. And I wanted to kind of move to a way that maybe people could look at practice and how they talk to themselves in a different way. And I remember one of the most really interesting thing among many of the things that you said one time that most golfers, when they go out to work on their game, if you will, and they're trying to fix something, that in fact what they're doing is they're practicing hope and fear. And they're getting very good at that by trying to change all the time. So what I wanted to ask you was, rather than go through that whole trope that most golfers do year after year after year, I'm going to fix my swing. I've been doing it for 16 years. Maybe this is the year I fix it. So what would your, I don't know, advice or counsel be for maybe a different way for people to approach taking their game? You know, they want to hit the ball more solid for sure. So what would be a different way rather than practicing hope and fear?
Well, I would imagine giving them a golf lesson. And a person says, I want to hit the ball more solidly. Always, they've been teed up that I'll have an answer for them. See, suppose, Tim, that you started empowering people from the very first moment you see them and having them learn how to empower themselves. I would say to them, where do you think you ought to pay attention? They would say, well, you're the golf pro. You tell me. And I said, there's lots of possible ways. So you can pick it, you can bacon strip divots, deep divots, all that. It seems like what are you asking to develop here? And they'll say, I just want to learn how to hit the ground at the right spot when I'm hitting an iron. And so I would say, okay, terrific. And I would say, in this hour lesson, if you could coach yourself at the end of this, where to brush the ground and how it happens, is that enough for your time? Because it's all about self-coaching. If you hit the ball well in front of me and can't recreate it, we failed. And if you can learn how to recreate what you've done here by yourself, then we're a success. So ultimately, it's about your experience of what's actually happening here. See, if you tee up the opening conversation well, self-coaching now becomes the common sense way of looking at things, because everybody wants an answer. And they don't realize the answer is always within their own experience. So I would say to them, listen, at what speed and at what length of swing could you have your best sense of where the club is brushing the ground? They'd say something like, well, probably less speed than fast, and maybe less distance. Maybe half swing and half speed. I say, okay. And where would you maybe need to pay attention to for this to happen? So it's all about teeing them up for self-coaching and having them learn that their own experience. See, what a golf lesson can do, it can bring a person to their experience, and that's it. Most people think, I have the answer for you as a teacher. I'm the one who's going to make you able. And I tell people, okay, do you want my 50 years of golf knowledge or 1,000,000 years of evolution to guide you? And I said, I think you ought to trust the second one. Because we all have beliefs and points of views and all those things, assumptions. And so it's like if a person would say, okay, remember the first thing I said here, honor your commitment to yourself. First, find out. Like Sunil, this guy was committed to freedom and creativity, the guy I talked about, no matter what. And he's now playing in the California Senior Amateur, and he writes back, I kept my commitment for the entire 18 holes. Freedom and creativity.
Very early on in Extraordinary Golf, you say you actually quite a bit about goal setting, and then one of my favorite sentences is, "The purpose of golf is ... for you to decide."
Yeah. Define your purpose.
And I think that as a takeaway from today, and a takeaway from a lot of the stuff we've discussed the last 10 plus years, that the closer you can align to that, the closer a person can align to that, I think the outcome becomes less about score as a purpose-driven construct and more about how happy am I when I'm leaving this experience.
Well, when we grow up in life, people say, Howard, you're going to be great on the radio. You're going to be a good dad. You're going to run a company, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody says to you, Howard, when you grow up, you'll discover who you are and your purpose in life. That isn't the goal. And until that becomes the goal, so to speak, then we're just off trying to find it. And we look for other people for a purpose. And if you watch the Ryder Cup, wonderful stuff to watch, but it's a 25-hour propaganda piece in which, losers get X, winners gets Y. The whole point is this: don't look bad, the whole thing. And it's very difficult in a culture that approves achievement over being. And so, little by little, a person can see that happiness is totally an inside job.
Well, I hope this was great on behalf of both of us and everyone listening. It's great to finally catch up with you again. I hope it won't be 11 more years or 10 more years, whenever it was fun. You mentioned yours. I don't want to say this like you're still teaching. Are you still teaching? Like, do you can somebody book a one-on-one with Fred Shoemaker?
Yeah, but mostly now I'm developing a program for golf professionals. It's a natural evolution. I did individual lessons forever, and then we did over 1,000 golf schools. Now I want to work with people who work with people. And it's just so interesting. I want people who think life is still widening rather than life is narrowing. And I find that very interesting. And so, of course, you have to do individual lessons because I'm not interested in living in the past, ideas that once had. I'm interested in what actually is happening now. How are things developing? That's what makes it more fun for me.
Well, Tim, any final thoughts for golf's real spiritual leader, Fred Shoemaker? Tim?
Fred, it's been great to catch up with you again and to hear from you again. It's kind of like you're, my words, the philosopher king of golf, and you've had a big influence on me, obviously on Howard, and it's just really great to connect with you again. And thanks so much.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Fred.
Everything gets passed down, guys. Thanks for all the great questions, too.
Yeah, and really appreciate your time. And again, we're not going to make a habit of it, but certainly less than 10 years from now, we'd like to see you again.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Fred Shoemaker. We'll talk about the future.
All right.
There you
hopefully. The book that started it all for us, Extraordinary Golf: The Art of the Possible. Fred, just let yourself out. Tim and I are going to do a couple more minutes, mainly just talking about you. So it's too embarrassing. When we talk about the guests, it's too embarrassing when they're still here. So thanks again.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
care.
Mike. Very nice.
Cheers. Bye.
Wow. Well, how about that? That's Fred Shoemaker.
Yeah. I love that. Golf's real spiritual leader.
Yeah, golf's actual spiritual leader. Yeah, that's he's something. I had a couple of, I think at least a couple of sessions with him after he was on the show trying to figure things out for me. And I know you had done some one-on-ones with him. Do you remember, and I was a little bit nervous today.
Me too, pal.
I was a little nervous because I didn't want to screw it up, and I wanted to, get as much as we can. The other thing I was a little nervous about too, and I know I'll share this with everybody. When you work with Fred on a Zoom call, or in those days on a Skype.
Yes.
The conversation, we had about an hour. I had an hour with him a couple of times, for money. He doesn't turn his camera on.
That's right.
And I was because I asked him why. He said, "Well, because I don't want I don't want it's not that he doesn't want to see you or you see him. He just wants the conversation to be, I guess, without visual cues or whatever it was." So I was thinking, when he comes on Swing Thoughts today, is he going to turn his camera on?
Well, it's really interesting is that what Fred is not into is idolatry. He's not interested in the least in being, lauded as this guru of the game. Although for people of a certain mindset about golf, he definitely is. I mean,
absolutely.
Pretty well every person you talk to in golf who thinks in a similar way as we do puts Fred kind of at the top of the mountain for sure. And I certainly have. I went to a extraordinary golf coaches workshop in 2017. And anyways, it was an amazing experience. And I was just such a, my jaw was on the ground. Oh, I'm actually with Fred Shoemaker.
Oh, I remember that.
Anyways, there was one point on the range and he said that, I think he said something along the line, if we're not empowering people, what the fuck are we doing? And he paused and I went, hey folks, I'm just getting around to the fact that Fred Shoemaker said fuck.
Well, I remember
and then after the workshop, I said at the very end, I said, Fred, thanks very much. But I said, I put you on a pedestal, but I now see you as a man because we all naturally do that. So as I said, he's not interested in that celebrity nonsense.
But I remember when you came back and you and I were talking and you said, I want you to come. Yeah, I wanted me to come to Guelph and give me a golf lesson. And now you're all excited to show me what Fred showed. I was all excited to learn. I love what he said about the idea of defining, and I had, well, guess what? I know I'm jumping around here, but do you remember when we first met? I remember that first time you were doing the article and on me, and we're just discussing things that we had read. And this was the book that kind of like I went, okay, if he's read that book and I think so much of it, well, he can't be all that bad. And that's kind of was, you know what I mean? It was it's like a common, a foundational commonality that a lot of us, you and I, and people that have read the book and are into him. But back to what he was talking about, defining purpose, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about, this tournament season and how I want to appear, and and I know I'm not the same person that interviewed him all those years ago. I just know I'm not. I know I've definitely spent more time looking inward than I had prior, which is why I enjoy the game so much more, come what may. But I've thought a lot about this tournament season and how things are shaping up and how do I want to show up? And in rereading the book and hearing him talk about the nature of purpose as the foundational part of goal setting, that I've got to remember that what is my purpose for doing this? And it's not just so I can hit the ball better. One of the first things I ever learned from you, and I've never forgotten it, was the idea I was miserable and you said, hey, maybe you should try, and maybe it's a Fred thing, but it came out of your mouth when you said, maybe you should try and spend the next round or two, being a better partner and having some interest in other people, et cetera, as opposed to grinding away during every swing and in between swings. And that's made a big difference. And those lessons are still lessons I have now, because if I can continue, I was playing the other day and I can start to feel that feeling where I'm not outwardly focused, where a hole or two will go by and I'm not really there. And then I remind myself, you're here now. This is the ground. That's the sky. You're with your dear friend. You've met a new person. What are they all about? You know what I mean? I found myself widening my gaze, because we all feel it when we get inwardly focused about, why am I still fucking hooking this ball? You know what I mean? But at least I know, and what he said made me feel great when he was talking about the trick is to catch yourself.
Totally. Awareness.
Awareness is curative.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't change unless you are aware. And that's the thing that I find so fascinating is that what Fred and Carl and some other, our folks who we get on the show is that how do we change this mindset that if I get better, I'll be happy and I'll chase some technique or some model to get there. But you never get there. And so, but it takes experience and it takes time. I'm 69 freaking years old, and I really feel like I only started to really get golf about maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, same.
And and it's actually a natural evolution. I mean, when you look at so Carl Jung, and you talk about a spiritual leader and psychology and spirituality, basically the same thing. He said the key thing, what happens for us humans, is that we go through a process called individuation. And as we get older and we move through different stages of life, we start to find our purpose. And in finding our purpose, we define what that is. We start to let go of the nonsense of, everyone will think I'm great if I earn this amount of money. I'll look good if I shoot this score. That starts to fall away. And we start to find more contentment and peace in our sense of purpose at a higher level. And so the interesting thing I find is that as we start to kind of follow a path that kind of goes to a North Star that we don't even really know what it is, life in some ways gets like easier. There's actually studies that show people in their 80s, and I don't want to wait that long, are the happiest people on the planet.
Well, if I could just jump in and
jump in, please.
What you're saying about, there's a bunch of sayings that come to mind, like the older I get, the less fucks I have to give. But that's part of that process. Is you shed, you get rid of all the things that don't matter. And the reason that 80-year-olds are in some ways psychologically happier, even though everything hurts, I think I'm already there. But because psychologically, you know that with shortened time left, you've got to give less of a shit. And then magically, caring less, or as you used to say to what you say to those, the kids on your golf team, if you can slightly care less, you can access your abilities.
Right.
But another thing that comes to mind is, that idea, I've said it too, in relationship as it relates to golf. I wish I knew in my 30s what I understand now in my mid-60s.
Both golf and women?
It took me a long time to learn that lesson. But for sure. Well, for sure about women. But certainly in the idea that, if I could have had the mindset I have now as a competitive golfer in my 30s, who knows how much better I might have competed. But then I look back, considering what he said, my purpose was all fucked up because I only wanted to look good, shoot low scores, tell people where I played, blah, 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 blah. And then now, yes, I want to be competitive, but my goals in playing the game are so much different now. I had a round on Monday with our friend Ken Osborne, our friend of the show and dear friend of mine, and I can tell you no part of that day and my enjoyment of it had anything to do with how I scored and what I shot and how I played. Yeah, we have that as it's going on because we're walking along, enjoying the day, and then every so often we have to stop talking and hit a shot. But that wasn't the priority for me. I was excited to go up there because I hadn't seen him for a few months. Whether I was going to have breakfast with him or go golfing, it was the same thing for me now. Whereas prior to that, I would be all about how am I going to look? When am I working on this thing in my swing? And hope I can get ready for this. It's all just background noise now, which is why, to your point, you enjoy it more.
Yeah, but again, not to blame everything on this bad old society, but that's how we're conditioned. All the information that's coming, this tsunami of information coming at our phones is saying exactly what we've been talking about. The fallacy of I'll be happy when, and you have to look a certain way. And it's also counterintuitive and interesting, the examples he used about Scotty and that fellow Sunil. So he talked about how they had committed themselves to, I think Scotty was about learning. Sunil, it was playing with creativity and freedom.
Yeah.
And so they committed themselves to those things, a sense of purpose. And the bonus was they both play at a super high level now. You know, both, I think one at two U.S. amateurs, one at two
Senior
Sunil.
state amateur or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that interesting? The bonus. So instead of chasing the carrot, you know, like craving that you're going to get this thing, you just slip a lot more often. But when you have a higher level of purpose, you not only feel better, but you're able to access what you have, that brilliance you've got.
Absolutely. And again, I'll come back to this as we finish. The purpose of golf is for you to decide. By the way, I want to acknowledge that 2 weeks in a row I played the same Rory McIlroy clip. And I honestly, it wasn't until about a minute ago I was like, oh shit, I was going to get that clip again and play it as though I'd never played it. But I just have to acknowledge that 2 weeks in a row. And Tim's such a sweet guy. At the end of last week's show, he goes, oh, by the way, just so you know, you played that clip. I'm like, did I? Because I'm 66. Thanks to Fred Shoemaker. I don't know how you just Google him. Fred Shoemaker. Thanks to Nick. Nick, tell us. Nick's doing such a great job with our social media. Nick.
Hello.
Nick, tell everyone how to hang out with us.
And so on Instagram and Twitter, it is swing_thoughts_podcast. And then you can find us on YouTube, all one word, Swing Thoughts Podcast. There should be a sneak peek clip going out tomorrow about this exact episode, actually. So hopefully everybody likes it.
Well, I hope they do you know what? I guess for all our sakes, Nick.
Yeah. Little housekeeping, Nick. Don't disappear after the show. I want to have an official Swing Thoughts production meeting. It'll be short, but
all right.
Sounds good to me.
You know what I know? When he's like this, Nick, one of us is in trouble. O'ConnorGolf.ca, and of course, humbleandfredradio.com. I've reached out to our friends at TaylorMade. We might get a TaylorMade rep on next week talking about the new driver. I've got to say this, even though they are our sponsor, the TaylorMade QI 4D driver. I've played 2 rounds of golf with it. It's pretty good. I'm just going to say this. You know, I know that they're our sponsor and friends. And yeah, you know, the copy says their fastest, most fittable driver. It's time to find your new fast. I'm just going to tell you. Old Howie's hit a couple out there that were... Well, I had a couple that I was a little surprised that they ended up where they ended up. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Nice. Well, I mean, yes, there are sponsors and friends, but there also is data. Now we're going to talk about the Spider putter right now. It's the hottest putter in golf right now. And there's been articles about, is the blade dead? Is everything with the mallet? And, you know, Scotty plays the Spider, and our good friend Nick, who heads up TaylorMade Canada, said that there's a new Spider coming out in June. So we'll get somebody on to talk about that, because I think there is really something there interesting to look at in terms of the mallet versus the blade or whatever else there is. But there you go.
I'll just say, but whether it's the putter or this new driver, and this is the first time I've had a TaylorMade driver in a couple years, the newest one, I should say. And they have all the numbers over the decade that I've been fit there, as with you as well. I got to tell you, man, I noticed a difference, and it's a significant. Like, yeah, all drivers are forgiving now versus when you and I started playing with like pieces of wood and shit. But I'll tell you the speed that comes off the face of this driver is very impressive. And so, hey, if you're thinking about getting something this year, we heartily recommend the QI 4D. All right. Hope everyone is well and we get some weather to play, and we'll see you all next week. Take care.
You get a shiver in the dark, it's raining in the park, but meantime